From the first place of liquid darkness, within the second place of air and light, I set down the following record. It is a mixture of fact untruths and memories of truths, and its direction is always towards the third place, where the starting point is myth. I walk up the path under the old ghost tree, that huge pine with the drooping branches. I walk in the porch, treading on last year's squashed pears. No one to gather them anymore. The old iron boot last is still here. Dad's fishing bag, as I remember it. Fishy stink and scabbed inside with dried scales. And here are his thigh gumboots for wading in the shingle beds of Waitaki, Rakaia, Rangitata, Willow Glen. I didn't expect it to be the same. Yet how else could it be? My family, living and dead. Grandad Frame from Paisley, who made the boot last. My father, a Scots thistle seed in a New Zealand pasture. Lottie Clarice Godfrey, defying her Christadelphian faith to marry and become mother. To Myrtle first, then Bruddy, the one that died, me in 1924, Isabel and June.
God will help us.
Mother.
Consider the lilies of the field.
So deeply immersed in the family that she seemed seldom at home. Her world was forever past tense. But magically,
Look, kiddies.
she brought her childhood,
The flowers of the forest.
Can I see?
her poems and
The
songs
snowberry.
into our present.
Look at the passions. It's tiny.
Along with her humility, she led us to try to discover the heart of everything. Father worked on the railway. We shifted with the work. My first memory is of Outram, the house with the walnut tree, and Betty the cow. I remember the golden beastie grazing, and my most treasured possession, my gold velvet beastie dress. I remember a grey day when I stood and listened to the wind moan in the telegraph wires. I looked up and down the white dusty road and saw no one. The wind was blowing from place to place and I was there in between, listening. I felt a burden of sadness and loneliness, as if something had happened or begun. I don't think I'd yet thought of myself as a person looking out at the world. Until then, I felt I was the world. We shifted from Outram to Glenham, accumulating new treasures. My secret place, new songs, with Dad playing bagpipes, Mum her accordion,
The lighthouse on the rocky shore.
Mum's poems,
The seagull's lonely cry.
picnics on the beach.
And day departing leaves behind God's pictures in the sky.
Then came winter, with kerosene lamps and candles,
The southern
pains,
lights, kiddies.
fevers, rats and bone-grinding cold.
Jack Frost is coming for your toe.
We shifted again, from Glenham to Edendale, then from Edendale to Wyndham. In Wyndham I discovered that the world held more people than I had dreamed of. Wyndham also marked the end of my infancy and my introduction to the world of contradictions, where words assumed a special power. Began with the dentist. And as I remember, I hear the whining drill, placed there for my future time, the sound of my fear across the years. The nurse comes closer, smiling, and says,
Smell the pretty pink towel.
Unsuspecting, I do as she asks and find myself falling asleep. The words were a trap. They had not really meant smell the pretty pink towel, but I'm going to put you to sleep while I take your tooth out. Words had betrayed me. And I never forgot that deception. Wyndham Primary. And then there was starting school.
South Island, New Zealand, Southern Hemisphere, the world.
During my first week, I took some coins from my father's trouser pocket and bought chewing gum. I gave each of my classmates a pillow.
Billy Delamere, what are you eating?
Chewing gum from Janet Frame, he said, pointing at my red hair, red face.
Janet Frame, where did you get the chewing gum?
From Heath's, Miss Botting, I said.
And where did you get the money?
My father gave it to me.
Where did you get the money?
My dad gave it to me.
Come out here.
The words trapped me.
Up. Onto the platform. Face the class. Now, tell the truth.
All morning I stayed on that platform right through lunchtime. I held out obstinately until mid-afternoon.
Tell me the truth.
A small voice answered. I took the money out of my father's pocket. And so I learned that telling the truth could be as dangerous as lying.
Thief!
At home and at school I was now called
Thief!
It happened that my branding as
Thief!
coincided with inklings of the unfairness and injustice of the world. It was 1930. The Depression had begun and the swaggers passed through Wyndham asking for food. Mother warned us.
You mustn't laugh at people you think are funny. They might be angels.
Angels?
The world is full of people in disguise.
But what if he's not an angel, just a thieving beggar?
Then God still loves him, no matter how poor and peculiar he might be.
Perhaps God loved me too, for I was blessed with a fresh start. In 1931, we shifted from Wyndham to Eden Street, Oamaru. Eden. A garden. Seeing the long row of houses, electric lights, Mother panicked and spoke in her earthquake and lightning voice.
Surrounded by houses. We've never been surrounded before.
We children made it our place. We ran, crawled and climbed. Over the red iron roof, under the house piles, through the macacarp hedge, up the plum trees, down the creek and into the pine plannies. Then back to the house with a pull-flush lavatory and the summer house covered in roses, our very own theatre. Playing went on after school until dark.
Shh! Kiddies! Your granddad is trying to sleep.
Even then, there were guessing and imagining games, arguments and fights and impossible dreams of fame. And at bedtime, there was reading aloud. Us four girls, all under one blanket. I could read well and loved adventure books like To the Island.
It's Island.
It's Island, I-S-L-A.
It's a silent letter, Janet, like knee.
I accepted Myrtle's ruling because she was eldest, but within myself it was still the Island. I was very particular about words. So when the teacher asked us to write a composition, My Adventure, I wrote about crossing the bull paddock. It never occurred to me that I was allowed to make up an adventure.
Tell the truth.
And I learned 3 new words just as powerful as adventure. Decide, destination and observation. In fact, all 3 seem to be part of every story. When I found I could use this movement, this journey, to create adventures, my ever-shifting self was overjoyed.
Kiddies, enough! Your granddad needs quiet.
It's because he's dying.
Grandad Frame slept in the back room, his head rested, tilted on his thin neck like a bird's. He kept his glasses in a case lined with rich blue velvet, which filled me with sadness. It was a colour like the evening sky that had no end. It was like the question I had begun to ask. Why was the world? Why was the world? Which immediately gave the dizzying thought of no world and plunging everlasting depths. Grandad died and was buried and the earth on the grave sank.
It always sinks.
And then one night, Mother's earthquake and lightning voice
He's having a convulsion.
announced something terrible.
Hold him! Hold him!
He'll drown!
Our lives were suddenly changed.
Get out! All of you! Go to your room!
Our brother had epilepsy. Bruddy was stupefied with drugs and fits.
Bruddy, you must eat.
He was either convulsing or half asleep crying, or alone in a rage of confusion. At home he was helpless, at school he was bullied, and we girls avoided the horror, the fits and the no cure. Eventually Bruddy had to leave school. Mother devoted all her time to him and the bagpipe and accordion days were over. Anyone observing me then would have seen an anxious child full of twitches and tics. I stood alone in the playground, wearing the same hand-me-down kilt, stiff with constant wear. Then the hospital and doctor's bills came in.
I'll go down and jump over the wharf.
None of that talk, Curly. Consider the lilies of the field. God will help us.
he better get lively then.
One day,
See this plant?
I found a friend.
The juice cures warts.
Poppy had an ugly face,
And this one's called Fat Hen.
but she gave a name,
That's Lupin.
a voice
And this one,
to everything.
Poppy, that's someone's garden.
on our side of the fence.
But it's stealing.
Catching. It's different. I catch flowers all the time. Janet, let's see my best book.
Poppy lent me her Grimm's fairy tales.
Listen to this. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters.
My three sisters listened while I read,
But every morning, their shoes were quite worn through.
and I knew and they
They'd
knew
been dancing
gloriously that,
We are the dancing princesses.
for there was Dad, bent over the bootlass, saying,
Your soles are worn right through. Where have you been?
"Where indeed?" Myrtle brought us forbidden magazines to read under the covers.
And when she appeared on the moonlit veranda,
Of course, it was all true. Yet while we devoured fairy tales of all kinds, we were also hungry for information.
Mum, what did you do when you got married?
Your father and I jumped over a broomstick
But where did the babies come from?
from the stalk. Now go and lay the table.
Fortunately, Poppy had all the answers.
You screw, kiddo.
what's that?
In the spirit of adventure, Myrtle and Poppy's brother Ted tried to do it in the plannies. We watched with interest. And over dinner, anxious as ever to share the day's events, I said,
Myrtle and Ted did it this afternoon.
Did what?
Screwed, kiddo.
Right, lass.
Don't hit her, Curly.
You're coming with me, come on.
and he dragged Myrtle into the bedroom. She was only 12, but she already had her monthlies. We listened, terrified, while Dad belted her, and afterwards the doctor examined her. That night, like the night of Bruddy's first illness, affected a change in our lives.
Poppy, I'm not allowed to speak to you ever again.
And I'm not allowed to speak to you either.
Here's your book back.
Thank you.
Myrtle and I became closer. She was entering her proficiency year, and Dad warned her that if she didn't pass, she'd go to the woolen mills. An empty threat, as he couldn't afford senior high school anyway. But Myrtle would argue back. about everything.
You tell her not to do it, but she'll do it just the same.
Wearing lipstick?
Forbidden.
Going downtown on Friday night?
Forbidden.
Chewing gum?
You'll get the belt.
Okay, Chief.
Myrtle wanted to be an actress, an ability she proved by reciting her poem on the radio.
I met at Eve, the Prince of Sleep. His was a still and lovely face.
She spoke all 7 verses by heart, and so was
Halfway to becoming a film star. And I have good legs. I can run fast.
And swim.
So I'll be strong enough to be at MGM Studios sharp at 6 each morning and dance at Hollywood parties all night.
In your
my
backless.
Then, when she was running in the school sports, she collapsed and was brought home. The doctor said she had a heart defect.
Our Myrtle? No, that's impossible.
For a time, we watched and waited. But Myrtle didn't stop breathing, and soon we forgot. But she was no longer thought strong enough to work at the mill, and so she became a domestic help.
So that worked out all right.
Meanwhile, Bruddy was ill, day after day and night after night. Mother struggled to look after him and find a cure. She was beset by expert advice.
It could be his spine.
His eyes.
His ears?
And he's no better, is he?
While Mother's search continued, we kiddies ran wild. We became members of gangs and secret societies, rushing around town with Myrtle's lassie and Bruddy's laddie in a yelling, barking pack. It couldn't last. The neighbours, complaining of dogs jumping in and out of our windows, sent for the health inspector. He found chaos and filth.
While I have every sympathy for your predicament, Mrs. Frame, if something is not done, I will be forced to send the girls to welfare. For the good of the family, Mrs. Frame, I strongly advise sending the boy to Seacliff Hospital.
Seacliff? Never. Never. No child of mine will ever go to that place.
So the dogs were put in sacks and drowned in the creek. And Isabel, June and I settled into our new school year. I was now 9 years old, in Gussie Dimmock's class, and inexplicably
Janet,
the teacher's pet.
come and sit at the front by me.
It had always been other children who had been teachers' pets. Pretty little girls with clean hair ribbons.
Does anyone know why?
I was not pretty. My hair was a red frizz and my clothes were dirty. I never discovered the reason for his choice, unless he thought it was the only way to deal with my tics and terrors.
That's right, Janet. Well done. Now, I want you all to write a poem of your own starting, "When the sun goes down and the night draws nigh,
and evening shadows touch the sky." My first poem.
You shouldn't say touch. That's not right. In a poem, you say tint.
But shadows don't tint.
It's poetic expression, Dolt. Shadows always tint, stars twinkle, waves lap, and the wind roars.
She was so self-assured with her job and her slacks, I had to agree. Although for Gussie, I kept my word. Touched.
That's excellent, Janet.
Under Gussie's care, I blossomed. I was Dux of the school, 1934, first. I was presented with a medal and a year's subscription to the Oamaru Athenaeum, the town library. I'd never seen so many books. I choose Grimm's fairy tales, a William book for Bruddy, a detective story for Dad.
Oh, Sexton Blake, thank you, Janet.
And a Dickens for Mum.
Born in poverty and growing up to be a great writer. Tunic, blouses, black...
Going to junior high meant a new uniform.
Pants, shoes.
She'd be better off working at the mill.
She won the Ducks. She's going to be a teacher like Cousin Peg. We'll have to manage.
Mother bravely made a tunic, a disastrous hybrid garment with a yawning yoke. And then 1935 saw the election of a Labour government with social security.
Free health care!
Free hospitals!
It was like the second coming. Dad did a spontaneous dance of delight and thrust the medical bills in the fire. It was too late for Myrtle, but my education was secure. In my first year at Waitaki Junior High, I made up my mind to be a poet
Only the poets know, kiddies. Only the poets.
This renewed interest was prompted by our teacher, Miss Lindsay, who was devoted to verse speaking.
Mum, we had Ring Out the Wild Bells today.
Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud,
the frosty light, the year is dying, let him die. We had that too.
Myrtle was homesick for a world she'd lost.
Of course, I have a book of poems accepted by Stockwell's, Ilfracombe, England.
We know, Mum.
Her joy faltered, knowing she could never afford the publication fee. Just as Myrtle knew she would never be an actress.
The pine trees whisper as they sway.
It's no surprise my own early poems were about days gone by.
Sadly lonely through the day, bringing back sweet memories.
The summer put us back in the present, back together, away on Dad's railway pass for a week's camping in Rakaya.
Rakaya, kiddies, the snow-fed river.
We explored, up all the gum trees.
The tides run up the Wairau.
Mum sat in the sun, tending the billy and making up funny rhymes about dead salmon fishing. Myrtle and Dad stopped fighting, and Bruddy
That's it.
only had one fit.
Smile, everyone.
We were happy. When the photographs of our holiday were developed, Mother gasped. Myrtle appeared to be transparent while everyone else was flesh and blood. That year, 1936, there was a polio epidemic. Junior high could not reopen and summer blazed on with blue stone skies.
Come on, it's glorious. Come to the baths for a swim.
No,
I'll pay you in.
I'm doing schoolwork.
Oh, Daddy's little duck's pet. Going to be a teacher. You're so boring, Janet.
So are you. I don't want to sit looking at boys in their togs. We did that all summer. Go with Isabel.
Okay, I will. She's more my type anyway.
And she went. I continued to study until late afternoon when...
Mrs. Frame, I'm a doctor. It's about your daughter Myrtle. She's been drowned. They've taken her body to the morgue.
The morgue?
At first I was glad. There'd be no more quarrels with us frightened and crying. But then she didn't come home that night.
I met at Eve, the Prince of Sleep. His was a still and lovely face.
To bring in her shoes, cleaned with the whitener and left to dry in the sun.
In a lonely place.
And I understood then that the price of peace was Myrtle's entire removal from the face of the earth. After the inquest, her body came home.
Do you want to see Myrtle?
No.
The fear, and after, the regret.
We will see her on Resurrection Day, Janet.
Myrtle was buried. In time, the ink on the cards ran. The ribbons rotted. The grave sank.
It always sinks.
And school opened again.
Beautiful Evelyn Hope is dead. Sits and watch by her side an hour. That is her bookshelf. This her bed.
I discovered that many of the poets knew about Myrtle's death and how strange it was without her.
She plucked that piece of geranium flower.
The poets exaggerated, though, for Myrtle had not really been beautiful or anyone's darling. She was just my teasing, pinching elder sister.
Yet once more ye laurels, and once more ye myrtles.
But hearing her name in class sent such a piercing shock through me that I clenched my toes and gripped my hands on the lid of my desk to stop myself bursting into tears.
Now thou art gone, and never must return.
Myrtle's passing did not bring peace. Fearful, my father turned all his anger on Bruddy.
But ask you to do an hour's graft. Oh, no, that'll bring on a fit.
He can't help it, Curly.
Rolling in the dirt like a dog.
It's his condition.
You spoil him. That's his condition.
With so much change around me, it seemed natural that the ruling about Poppy should change too. So passing on the street corner, we spoke.
You've heard I'm taking commercial?
Yes.
I'm doing shorthand, typing, and double entry bookkeeping.
Do you like it?
How could she?
We do grammar logs all the time.
Oh.
But we're having Ode to a Nightingale. Thou was not born for death.
The words swept out of Poppy like a cry of panic. I remembered her gift of Grimm's Tales all those years ago. This was her parting gift. I didn't know how to receive it because I didn't understand it. And we hurried to our different worlds. My first year at Waitaki High School began with the usual worries about money, my rotten teeth, and my tunic.
It's too tight, Mum.
No, it's fine.
It's squashing my breasts.
It'll just have to do. We can't buy a new one. Well, just for a few months.
I, now the eldest girl, did my best to smooth the surface of life at home, to agree and smile, do chores, go fishing with Dad and talk about the latest Sexton Blake. So I put on my too-tight uniform and faced the scrutiny of...
And of course patent leather is best. Oh yes.
The group.
And buckles. Never laces. Laces are for farm girls.
The group's fathers were doctors and auctioneers with cribs on the coast. Their power and happiness flowed from them. They were able to impose their taste in dress, manners, leisure activities, films, and books.
You must read the new Georgette Heyer. It's based on a true story.
I drew the line at Georgette Heyer, my one rebellion. But I submitted to the group's judgment in all other matters, just as I submitted to the tastes of the poets. I wrote my own verses replete with their dreams and dawns and flowers, their soft, deep, old, grey, little tints.
Oamaru is the kingdom by the sea, from the poem Annabel Lee.
Jean's so original.
Was I? Certainly life at home with the terrifying episodes of my brother's illness was unlike that of my classmates.
You frame girls think you're so different from everyone else.
So the idea of difference, given to me by others in a time when I did not know myself, was powerful. I came to accept it, although in our world of school, to be different was to be peculiar, a little mad. I was conscious too of my physical difference, my too-tight tunic, dirtied with cow muck, my bad teeth and cobble-mended stockings, and my hair.
No one else has red hair like yours. It grows up like an African's. Why don't you straighten it? Can't you put oil in it or something? It's so fuzzy.
I didn't need to read Georgette Heyer to put myself in a costume drama. I only had to sit on the stone bench of Waitaki Girls Senior High.
We don't care if the school falls down. No more English, no more French, no more sitting on the old school bench.
By the summer holidays, Myrtle had disappeared almost without trace. I could see only the white centipede scar on her knee, her golden hair. She had been so fearless, challenging, as Isabel was growing up to be. Whereas my only place of rebellion was within, in an imagination that I was not even sure I possessed.
When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain?
My second year at high school, 1938, began with Miss Farney, who cast me as Lady Macbeth.
Here's the smell of the blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh, oh, oh!
I never did perform it before the school, but one morning I used Mother's earthquake and lightning voice to announce,
There's blood between my legs.
It's your monthlies.
And Mother cut an old bath towel into rectangular strips.
Pin that to your singlet, front and back.
It will show.
No, it won't.
I knew it showed. Bought sanitary towels were unheard of in our household, so I suffered those bulky strips of toweling.
Yet, here's a spot.
But the afternoon smell of stale menstrual blood
Janet?
and the unceasing shame.
Janet?